Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I'm David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles. With me is...
Mike Van Ruth, 4th Dan Aikido, 4th Dan Ito.
And Bill D'Angelo, 4th Dan Aikido. So I think today we're talking about what traditional martial arts are, or what the definition is of traditional martial art.
Traditional martial arts is a very difficult concept. What the question is, what is traditional? I mean, what do you think the traditional?
Well, you check all the topics out, and everyone's having all these conversations and discussions about what is traditional. And everyone has their own idea what that is. And my standpoint is where our teacher came from. You know, that was traditional. The dojo I went to beforehand wasn't as traditional, and I was looking for something more traditional. And when I visited Aikido Center Los Angeles, I was like, whoa, I thought I was going to Japan. This place is awesome. So that was my perception of what tradition was, the way they trained, the discipline, and everything else.
I thought about this and thought it might make sense to start from a third-party source definition of just tradition, not necessarily specific to martial arts. And in the Oxford English Dictionary on the word tradition, it has 3 different line items on the definition, all of which I think flow into martial arts. And specifically, I think how you, Sensei, might play off of this. The first one is that tradition is the transmission of customs or beliefs from generation to generation, or the fact of being passed on in this way. That's number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 is, specifically to Japanese cultural institutions, a long-established custom or belief that has been passed on from generation to generation. So that's slightly different. And then the last one, which I think applies very well to Aikido, is an artistic or literary method or style established by an artist, writer, or movement, and subsequently followed by others.
Oh. So therein lies the problem. So if you think about this idea of traditionalism being adhering to a methodology or a standard, like let's say it's the way you make butter, right? And then so the product of the butter over the years will taste pretty much the same if they keep it close enough. Aikido is a lot different than that. You can't really keep it close enough to where it's like exactly what Ito Sensei was doing, because he was so far ahead of people. So being so far ahead of people, his enlightenment, it's like we're just imitating that enlightenment. So then how can we be traditional? So that's kind of the hard part. So when I start to think about this idea of what is traditional, I used to think it was to have the exact same practice and the exact same techniques done the way my teacher, Reverend Kensho Furuya, did it. But then when I think about it now, I think I'm not exactly like him. I don't have the same body size. I'm not the same. I don't have the same experience that he does. He's just a couple inches taller than I am. I'm more athletic than he was. So we have all these different things. So then how can I possibly stay true to the quote unquote tradition if I'm not that same person? We're not even related.
Do you think that, going off this definition of a transmission of customs or beliefs, can we break down what we're transmitting in a traditional martial art? Is there a way to break it down between content and method?
Well, there's that is what we do right now. It's like our content is as close as we can possibly keep it to the way Furuya Sensei demonstrated it to us. But that's where it comes down to. It's a methodology. Traditional is just a methodology. If I deviate 1%, which is very low, and then my student or my kids deviate 1%, and then their kids 1%, in 10 generations, that's only 10%. But most people aren't deviating 1%. They're deviating 20, 30, 50, 90, and then in 5 generations, what happens? And that's why you talk about this idea of generational wealth. If you can keep your family's wealth into the second or third generation, you're going to be doing okay. But generally, it's the people in the second and third generation that squander all the money and ruin it. So that's the hard part about what is traditionalism, especially in this modern 21st century.
Do you think, I mean, I try to think about this sometimes, what methods do we try to use that you would label or that might distinguish, let's say, our school from other schools that people would identify as traditional methods? I mean, things like, I'm thinking America doesn't have this anymore, but like the uchideshi system or senior versus junior responsibilities. Are these things are these kinds of ideas still actively followed? Are these debates that teachers are having still in traditional martial arts?
I mean, there are uchideshi systems around the world. It's really hard because most people only spend 6 months, a year in the uchideshi system, which is nothing. You must spend at least 10 years as an uchideshi or with your teacher to really get it that those ideas embedded into your body, right? You know, when I was a student, I used to work at this Japanese sweet shop in Little Tokyo down the street from the dojo. And one day Sensei came in, and then so I served him, and then we talked about something, and then he left. And all the old ladies, they laughed, and I was like, "What are you laughing at?" And they go, "Oh, you walk just like him." And they mimed walking like a overweight person. "You walk just like that." And I was like, "No, I don't. I'm not even. What are you talking about?" No. Then they said, "No, you walk just like him." And then you're like, "What? That's not even true." But like. At that point, I had been studying with Sensei for almost 10 years.
Right.
So that's that thing, right? How long does it take for you to pick up every little nuance that your teacher is doing, right? Like, it's really interesting. Like, sometimes when you listen to Watanabe Sensei talk, he says things exactly like Sensei does.
Yeah.
It's just all these
channeling,
like he's channeling Sensei. So like, but those little nuances, how long do they take to pick up? And then if we say that this traditional is a set of techniques that you're doing exactly the way your teacher did them, right? Like, and Ken is over 6 feet tall. Sensei was like 5'7".
Right.
I'm 5'4.5". Notice how I stress the half part, right? Like so you have different center of gravities. You have different lengths of arms, different lengths of legs, and so you can move deeper, slower, faster, or anything like that. Like. One time, a well-known Iaido teacher came to Little Tokyo and did a demonstration, and Sensei and the students went, and one of the students commented like, "Oh, that guy doesn't get very low in the technique, and he doesn't do that many seated techniques." And then Sensei said, "That's why it's because the teacher's really old. So the teacher's old and can't demonstrate those techniques, so maybe they don't even do them. So that's why they don't show them like that." I'm like, oh, but that's how closely you're supposed to copy your teacher, and that's why you're supposed to spend decade or two with that person, so that when you brush your hair, it's exactly the same way as that the teacher does it. So it's reminiscent, but that's where that's how you stay close to tradition. But I mean, who does that? No one wants to stay with their teacher for 10 years.
Is that a cultural thing? Is that just a day and age we live in, where we don't have that level of commitment like, say, of the past?
I would say it's too many competing things. The old days, you didn't have the opportunity to go check out 5, 10, 15, 20 teachers. You're like, someone said, how I came to Furio Dojo is I was doing kendo at Pasadena Kendo Dojo, and we were good friends with Nakuchi Sensei, the teacher. And my mother asked him, like, "Oh, do you know an Aikido teacher?" And there was an Aikido teacher at the place that they did kendo, and he said, "Well, I know this guy in Little Tokyo. He lives on top of the dojo. He's the real deal. You got to go down there." And so that was it. I went down there, right? But today you can look on the internet and go, "Oh, there's this person, there's this person, this person. Oh, and then they got online classes. You could do this, that. Oh, yeah." And then so many people today say, "I follow this person is my teacher," and I go, "Oh, do you live in that country?" No. I think, how's that person your teacher? Or there are people that call me, "Oh, I am your student." And I say, "But you don't live here." And then if you don't live here, how can you pick up every little nuance and really pass down that tradition. So that's what's really difficult about the modern age.
Well, even in Furuya Sensei's video series, the personality that people see on those videos was much different than his in-dojo personality. So could you really know your teacher if you aren't there with him?
How well do you know the teacher if you only see them, if you've only been following them for a year and you've only been to their dojo once and you only stayed there a weekend? Is that person really your teacher in a traditional sense? Now, you could still call that person your teacher, but we're talking about this topic of this podcast is traditional. That is not the traditional way. So, I mean, that's what makes it kind of difficult.
Now, from a traditional sense, obviously we train in a martial art, but there's so many different aspects to what we do rather than a consumer-based activity where I get this lesson, I pay the money, and then I leave. A traditional school has a deeper level to it.
Yeah. And that's where it's very difficult. Like, I paid my dues, so I deserve this thing. When Furuya Sensei was alive, it was like, I paid my dues, and then he would end the sentence for you, and you would deserve nothing, right? Like, the worst punishment that he could give you, he said, was to deny you practice. He said practice is a privilege. So if you acted out or something, he kicked you out, and that was like the worst, supposed to be the worst punishment. But we were like, cool, got the weekend off, man. I don't have to come back to that seminar where you're going to yell at me the whole time. I'll take the weekend off, right? And then, but in the traditional sense, that was like a huge deal because you're going to miss all these hours or minutes of training. And then because you miss them, you're going to miss some little nuance that the teacher only showed one time. Like I remember techniques that Sensei only showed once, but I remember them. But what if he didn't? I missed that day. I never would have saw that.
Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about that, getting yelled at, this and that, we're a more modern school. You go in, you pay for your classes, you get taught, and you go home. Everything's hunky dory. Where there's a level of discipline where you're going to get yelled at, you're going to get called out. What do you call it? You want the real deal?
Yeah, no, nobody wants the real deal. Do I even want the real deal? I have no idea. I mean, they say that the student has Iji, which is willfulness, and it's the teacher's job to change that willfulness into konjo or fighting spirit. But then in that methodology, the teacher becomes the enemy of the student. And the student's like, I'm going to beat the teacher at his own game. But that is a very difficult way to be. Like today, in Japan, they can't hit the students anymore. They can't discipline them harshly. There's been several sumotori, wrestlers who had sumo wrestlers under them that they were treated harshly, and then the person got hurt or got killed, and then they lost their ability to be a sumo wrestler. It happened in judo, happened in basketball. But that's the thing is that, like in the old days, they used to say, you will remember everything at the end of the slap or after the slap.
Yeah, that is, as you've been speaking, there's a question that's starting to build in my mind, which is people think of traditional anything, whether it's martial arts, cooking, traditional way of making a car, as something that's continually repeated over and over and over again. And what you're talking about right now is certain things of tradition that it's hard to repeat, that has to change. And one of the things I've been thinking about, I know that you and I have spoken about it outside of the podcast, is how does a traditional martial art and a traditional dojo, which I think our dojo tries to be, how does it adapt? Like how, from your perspective as the chief instructor, what are the areas where you see us being able to adapt, as a community and as a martial arts school, while still being able to say we're traditional? Because adaptation seems to they push against each other.
Yeah, well, and that's the hard part, right? You have this idea of, so then what is traditional? Traditional then is a method of staying as close to the original as possible. So you have to kind of become serious about the process, right? So you're going to constantly be going off off the line, you have to come back to the line, off the line, come back to the line, but you have to have the discipline to come back. That's the traditional. So if this middle line is the tradition, you're going to deviate. You have to have enough awareness to come back, deviate and come back. And so the trajectory is like this, rather than if I just deviate 1%, 1%, 1%, 1%, sooner or later
end up far away.
You're just making, pancakes. You're like, I thought this was an Aikido dojo. Yeah, but we got into this thing, 20 generations later. You're like, wow, how did that happen?
Are there... So if there are like specifically Aikido students watching the podcast, I mean, and this is generally for martial arts too, but from a traditional standpoint, are there techniques that you would say are the like truly core traditional techniques that you identify as part of the Hombu style Aikido as taught by Furuya Sensei?
I don't know.
Okay.
Because of course, the party line is to say, yes, you have to know Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo, this thing. And the secret to getting good at Aikido is practicing Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo over and over and over. And if you can get good at that, you'll be good at Aikido, right? And so then you sprinkle in Tenkan, Iriminaga, and all those types of things, and then you would be good at Aikido. But the point is, the hardest part is that any deviation that Furuya Sensei put into the technique of his own muddies the water of traditional Aikido. Any deviation that second doshu puts in muddies the water of Aikido. So then that's the hard part, that what do we really know as being this is traditional or this works or this doesn't work? We don't. So the thing is just to be serious about the process, right? So if you're serious about the process, you'll look at things with more sober eyes and think, yeah, but that, that technique is very specific to that teacher. And when you watch these videos of Sensei, he never did that technique. So then if maybe is that one the best technique to be practicing regularly? Probably not.
Right.
But then if you're not serious about the process, you go, yeah, whatever fun. You know what, everybody, we're going to spend the next 3 months on Hambo, short staff or short stick techniques. Or we're going to do gun takeaways, which Sensei never really did handgun takeaways. He did rifle takeaways, he did spear takeaways, but he never did handgun takeaways. But then, but that's what I think is necessary. It's not what I think is necessary. It's what is trying my best to stay as close to what my teacher taught as best as I can. And so then being serious about the process is just going back. If I deviate at all, I have a sober enough eyes or aware enough eyes to look at the movement and go, oh yeah, I moved. I'm very athletic, so I could drop down. But Sensei never did that.
So it seems like on the one hand, you're highlighting the mental position towards training and understanding a sort of core set of ways of doing a technique and your teachers. I'm wondering if because I think in our school we've talked about this, and I know other schools do too, that Aikido as a tradition is tied specifically to the founding family and the founding dojo. And can you talk a little bit about how that the relationship to Hombu Dojo is part of the sort of higher level practice? I mean, I know there's certain seminars that a lot of Aikidoists go to when Doshu's training, and how does that fit into the traditional practice? How does that benefit our traditional practice?
Well, that's the hard part, is that faith and loyalty are a huge part of it. Furuya Sensei, I studied with Furuya Sensei. Furuya Sensei studied with Second Doshu. Second Doshu studied with Ito Sensei. That we enjoy that lineage, right? So Sensei said we can consider ourselves Magodeshi, grand students, grandkids, grand students of the founder. That how many degrees of separation are you away from O-sensei? 40, 50, 10, 12, 2? And that you would think that the closer you are, the more traditional, valid, appropriate it is. But that's not always true either. But the point is that you're trying to do your best to stay as close to the process as you can. If I thumb my nose at Hombu Dojo and Doshu and all those people, why am I doing that? Because something that they do doesn't benefit me. Everything that they do benefits me.
Right.
If they keep their doors open, that benefits me because I do Aikido and that I support. Why do we support Hombu Dojo? We support Hombu Dojo because Sensei created Aikido, and we support his family and his lineage because that's the least we can do, right? To say thanks. Well, I could just start my own thing. Be my own Aikido, some call it David Aikido, but who am I?
Right.
I'm just ripping off. I'm just Colgate ripping off Crest, saying that that's my toothpaste. That's super empty. That faith and loyalty that we have to have, regardless, right? It's like we were talking earlier about what type of uniforms to wear. Like, Sensei wore Iwataya uniforms. Well, I like this uniform better. That's nice for you. That's nice for other people. But I want to do my best to support those structures which supported Sensei and those types of things. Not just because this other brand has dry wick fabrics in the armpits so the armpits don't get all yellow or whatever it is that the people are doing today. That's the problem with innovation, right? Like in creativity, it's that, it's like Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma, right? These things happen. Sometimes they become the norm. But then just because they become the norm doesn't mean that they become valid, better, and all those things, right? Like, I don't slap anybody, even though I wish I could, right? But I don't slap anybody. But I got slapped by my teacher, right? But I understand today that I don't know if that works.
Right.
Also, I don't have that, my heart, it's too hard on my heart to slap someone.
Right.
But boy, I saw Sensei slap me, and I saw Sensei slap a whole bunch of people, right?
Yeah, I think all three of us at the table got the hard hand once, at least.
But then you remember, hopefully you remembered the reason why you got slapped, and then you didn't do that thing anymore. But to a person of today may not be able to let go of the fact that they got slapped.
Right.
Who knows? I mean, but then again, it comes back to the individual and how closely you want to stay to the process of Aikido. Furuya Sensei said that Ikkyo, Nikkyo, Sankyo, Yonkyo hold all the keys to Aikido. So just practice those, ad nauseum. So then you do that. But then you go, well, I don't think he was right. I think he's trying to lie. I think he's trying to trick me. But then that's where you start to deviate. Like, oh yeah, we should start doing, they have one picture or two pictures of Sensei pinning someone to the ground doing groundwork. Well, that's good enough evidence for me that we should start doing, groundwork in Aikido. Is it? I don't know, maybe. But the tachiwaza, the stand-up techniques, take so long to learn, right? And then you got two pictures that support your assertion that Aikido should be this way. But I watched you roll, and you could barely roll. So why don't you work on that? Why don't you work on that Ikkyo? No? Okay, I mean, let's get on the ground then. But that's the problem with interpretation. At what level should you start interpreting, right? So you think of this idea, shu, ha, ri. Shu is the stage where you memorize the movement.
Right.
Only memorize the movement, no questions asked. Ha is the detail stage where you start to look at all the details and you start to look at what are those smallest nuances. And the ri is the break free, where they break the technique, but really it's that you're no longer held to the exact recipe of the movement.
Right.
Right. But most people are diagnosing Aikido in the shu stage,
right,
and never get out of that. Well, Aikido should be like this, or Aikido should be like that. Like, I went to this one person's dojo where, they could do all these fancy Aikido moves, and the class were not that rigorous. But then when it came time to backward roll, nobody in the class could backward roll. And I was thinking to myself, that's odd. You could do all these fancy Aikido techniques, but then you can't backward roll. It seems to me that their training is quote unquote incomplete. But then, you're just being a jerk. You're not being collaborative. You're not being this thing. Maybe. But what's that? We fall back on my definition of traditional, which is staying as close, deviating and coming back to the process over and over again. And if someone points out that you can't back roll, you go, look, I got a back roll because that's part of Aikido.
Right.
There are several Aikido groups that took out eliminated Ikkyo and Ito Minage because they were too hard, right?
What? To the basic fundamental structures of Aikido.
They don't do that anymore. But that's the point. Like, if you eliminate this technique, like First Sensei said that every technique holds a secret to Aikido and maybe even life. So you have to practice this technique, and then you go, oh. But when do you have that epiphany?
Well, didn't Sensei tell that story? Why we did, in the beginning of practice, Kokyo-ho, we practice it over and over and over again, and he was like, well, you know what? That's what they started off practice with every time. I don't know, but there was a lesson to be learned from that. If you had faith in practicing that technique, and then you get that realization. Otherwise, it's like, what are we practicing that for? It seems so unrealistic.
Well, that's part of the problem. Like people today say that, this overhead shomanuchi is fake, that no one would ever hit you like that. But that's not the point. The point is to learn how to move in on somebody, iri-mi. But if we go, it's like that, we should be doing it this way. And then, then you should also be springing on your feet like Bruce Lee or like a boxer. Aikido's not like that. So, but then if we eliminate these things without knowing why we eliminated them, then all of a sudden Aikido's not the same as it was.
Right.
Right. Like when I was a student, before you guys were students, like we used atemi all the time. Right. But then today we don't use that much atemi. I don't use that much atemi in my technique because I don't really have to. Like the other day we were filming this video with Ikkyo atemi, and I kept messing it up. And then Ken Watanabe Sensei made a comment. He said, "Oh, you're doing it because you can't do it because you don't need it. So the uke has to mess this up in order to make it. Oh yeah,
for it to be necessary.
Yeah, but I didn't need it, and so it was really hard to do because I kept bypassing the point where you would have needed it. But that's the hard part. Like you can't take things away just to take them away.
Right.
Right, like you think, brushing your teeth. I don't have any cavities. Right now you don't, but let that go a couple months and you'll be chock full of cavities.
That old cowboy saying, "Don't take a fence down until you know why it was put up."
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question about traditional methods. And this is like more for beginner students, like people who maybe just catch this blog by searching Aikido, they're thinking about it, and maybe they use YouTube as their search engine. A lot of beginners, when they come into a traditional school, one of the first things that they may be have questions about is bowing. And if they're not familiar with traditional martial arts, they may not understand what the bow at the beginning means and the bow at the end, especially if they're religious. And a lot of some more stringent Christians, sometimes you'll find with instructors will be like, I'm not sure what this means and can I do this? And it seems that bowing is part of the courtesy and respect that's shown in traditional dojos. And I thought it was an interesting topic to talk about because courtesy and respect are such an integral part of traditional martial arts.
Francis actually had a very interesting answer to this question. He said, we bow as a sign of respect. So in the Western world, we shake hands. Maybe not today because of COVID and all that stuff. But we used to shake hands, and sometimes we'd even shug. Right, there's handshake with the hug, the shug. Mm-hmm. But as a sign, it's a sign of respect. So O Sensei's Japanese. He's not a Westerner. So by putting out your hand, he doesn't understand what that is, right? And so you bow to him as a sign of respect, but not as a sign as he's a deity, which, of course, O Sensei is not a god, right? But that you stick out your hand, O Sensei doesn't know what that means, right? And so you bow because he knows what that means, and that if people don't want to bow, they don't have to bow, but they shouldn't think of it as bowing down because this person is an idol. Right. We bow to each other as a sign of respect that I bow to you because you are going to give me your body to work some stuff out on the mat, right? And so I bow to you as a sign of respect, and that reminds me not to abuse your body.
Right.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why you bow. So that's the hard part about like, well, if you don't bow, then let's say, because this is a traditional martial art and this is our custom is to bow and you don't bow, you go, oh, does this person have a problem?
Yeah. Game on.
Game on. And then you go, oh no, I don't bow because of this. My dad told me not to for whatever reason.
And you thought you were getting slighted.
Yeah. And then I punched you in the face or I choked you out. And then now a problem ensues all because no one understood your gesture.
Right.
You don't understand our gesture. We don't understand your gesture. And then,
so it's language, basically. What you're saying is it's part of the traditional language.
It's part of the traditional language, but to understand that it's not a sign of. It's not deifying a person.
Right.
It's not worship.
It's not worship. It's a show of respect. Like you shake hands. Well, why do people shake hands?
To show they don't have a weapon.
To show that they don't have a weapon in their dominant hand,
right.
And they, but they do that to start the beginning of a relationship. To say, let's start as equals, right? So the hands meet in the middle as equals,
right?
And then you hope that throughout this relationship, you guys stay on those terms, right? And the same thing when you bow, right? Your hands are supposed to make this triangle, and then you bow, and then you come out, and one hand comes out like this. But again, it's a sign of respect that let's start this relationship the right way, as
right.
opposed to, I'm not, like you said, I'm not worshiping this person. Like, I don't want to be worshipped.
I've read a couple of really interesting things. Some writers in New York and some in London, Western writers, saying that they think that there's a very good chance because of COVID that they've been advocating replacing the handshake with a bow and adopting. It probably won't happen, but they're saying it would be a smart way to go for just eliminating future transmission of.
So you're trying to say the Japanese had a head start on this?
Well, I mean, certainly Asia did have a head start on coronavirus. I mean, whether they have it now is a whole different story. But I just think it's interesting that there's a discussion about how behaviors evolve. Like even a traditional behavior may end up being a more efficient and safer. That's a totally different question.
Right.
But
that's the hard part about gestures. Like, do you see recently we had that problem with the Jeopardy. The guy, everyone thought he was
yeah, the white supremacy gesture.
But then if you look at his very first win, he went 1 win, second win 2 wins, and then he went 3 wins, and then that became this thing, and then people went bananas. But they went bananas because the gesture has meaning.
For some people.
All people, gestures have meaning.
Right.
We all know what this means.
Right.
We all know what these certain gestures mean. And so that's the hard part about, like, what does it mean to be traditional? Like, if the custom of the dojo is to bow and you bow and I bow, then we think, okay, then there's a mutual respect. But if I bow and you don't bow and you don't even look me in the eye or you don't tell me why, I think there's a problem here.
Right.
And then I'm punching you in the parking lot and you're like, what are you doing?
What?
And then I think, yeah, take that. And then you're like, oh no, I hurt my back and I can't bend at if you would have just said something, I wouldn't have to kick you in the face. Well, I'll drive you to our emergency room, right? He goes, sorry about that, buddy.
That brings up some interesting question about communication in traditional dojo. And maybe I pose this question to Mike, since he's the senior student under the, right? I mean, I guess.
No, Ken
and Jane are
the senior students. But actually, you outrank him because you've been in the dojo longer than him.
So maybe this is an open question to you, maybe to all senior students, is for someone who, let's say, has a hurt back and can't bow very far, and so they might send the wrong message and get Mike or I ended up beating the crap out of them and then feeling guilty later. What is the best way to communicate that before a class so that they don't get themselves beat up in a class?
Well, one of the things that you're trying to learn in Aikido, right, is conflict resolution, right? You're trying to learn how to use your words, not your fist. So why would you, let's say I hurt my back and then I don't tell the teacher that I hurt my back. Well, why don't you tell the teacher? Generally, you don't tell the teacher out of ego.
Fear.
Fear.
You feel stupid.
Fear. You feel, I slipped in the shower and I feel so lame and old. And then you don't say anything. And then people take the non-gesture as a slight and then calamity ensues.
Right.
And then because you're in pain, you're jamming the guy because you don't want to get thrown, and he's, oh, now he wants to jam me?
Oh, mister, I don't want to bow. But if you would have just used your words, right? Oh, please don't do that. I'm sorry, I can't bow. My back hurts. Oh, shoot. Okay, no, don't worry about it. Don't bow. But I mean, if you watch the way people bow today, I mean, like,
why bother?
Why bother bowing? It's like,
how traditional.
Yeah. Even some people in Japan are like, the bow is just
it's perfunctory almost. Yeah.
It's this thing, but that's the hard part, right? Like you want to. What is traditionalism, right? Like you're trying to learn all these different things, that gestures mean something, non-gestures mean something, doing this thing means something, don't doing it means something. And so again, you're trying to stick as close to the original as possible, as you accidentally don't bow, and then you remember to bow, and then you don't bow, remember to bow. But it's, like if you just forget to bow after a while. But that's that thing, is trying to stay. What does it mean to be traditional? Being traditional is being serious about the process, so that you have the ability to come back whenever you've deviated. But most people, they can't. They just make a dogma. Oh, we stopped doing that, so then I just made that the way.
Right.
What? How could you possibly make it the way? Like, there's a method in one martial art where they stick the sword in upside down, and then they pull the sword and the saya out at the same time, and then flick the saya at the opponent. And then, but where the teacher told my friend, oh, I made a mistake one time in class, and they just turned it into that, and so I just made it part of the technique. What? Okay, but then is that traditional? What did that teach your student? What did that teach this person? And then what did it replace? Now that was super cool, and everybody does it. So then now everyone's, saya banari, breaking their sayas to do that thing, and then you're making big bucks on new sayas.
Replacing sayas.
And that's the hard part. Like, again, did you deviate for your own ego? That's deviation from the tradition is generally about ego. You don't want to say that you don't know, so you just make it up. I mean, there's tons of times where, like, I'll teach a technique that I think this is the way Sensei did it, and then I'll watch Watanabe Sensei, and he'll do it a different way, and I'll go,
yeah.
What? And then I'll watch Sensei's video and go, I'm wrong. But then I have the humility and the awareness to go and then change it.
Right.
But most people are like, no, I remember this one time when you weren't there, and Sensei said that this is the new way to do it.
Right.
So this is the new way, everybody, because they're trying to hide the fact that they made a mistake or they don't know. But it's having the humility to say, yeah, I made a mistake. We'll just change it this way.
You bring up looking at a video, and this reminds me of I think all three of us heard this speech numerous times from Furuya Sensei, when he used to say, don't look at anything online ever about any martial art.
It's poison.
Yeah, he used to say it's horrible.
Yeah.
But we live in a different environment now.
Mm-hmm.
And how have you personally adapted the traditional teaching with the ubiquitous internet in martial arts?
It's very difficult, right? Like I watch Aikido videos, I watch martial arts, I watch tons of them. It's just what comes up in my feed. But some of them I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that person doing? And then I'll look and I'll have like 10,000 likes. And I'm like, who liked that video?
Yeah.
But that's the hard part, that people don't realize that what they're doing just becomes the way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then, oh, well, such and such just did it this way. Like sticking the sword upside down on the saya, that just became the technique. And then it was so popular, we just taught it everywhere. And then that just became the way. Right? And then all of a sudden, when it became the way, you end up not being very traditional. And the tradition is the thing which saves you.
Right.
If you're a person who dedicates themselves to Aikido, more than likely if you were to get in a fight, you'll be okay, because something about rewarding that faith and loyalty in the universe is there, right? You may not kill the person, you maybe didn't beat him to death, but you came out okay. But it's that thing where you didn't really train that hard to begin with. Like, I really don't think I trained that hard. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, you trained so hard. I go, I probably could have been better if I would have trained more.
Right.
But I'm very autodidacting, right? I can watch a video in my mind and then watch it and then in my mind dissect it and then I can do it.
Yeah.
But most people can't do that. But then I somehow picked that skill up being a student under Furuya Sensei
Right.
for all those years. But if I am that way, that's a skill. That's that you can't really teach someone.
Now, is that part of the traditional method? Because Sensei was very keen on not going to hold through a bunch of explanations, show it a couple, 3 times, and if you weren't paying attention,
Well, yeah.
then you got in trouble.
That's about flow states. So like if the teacher constantly talks, stops the class, talks, what end up happening is that you go out of your the learning flow state, and then go flow right into I think it's you flow into delta, if I remember. No, you flow into beta. So alpha and delta are the most the brainwave states where you learn the best. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, but one of them's not. So like it's conscious thought,
Right.
and so you're just like, oh yeah. So then if you're like listening and then trying to understand, your body will never get to learn it, right? But it's that idea that that the flow state, which causes your brain to allow this movement to get into your subconscious. So the movement becomes subconscious. The person punches and your hand automatically comes up. You don't have to consciously think about it. When you drive your car, you're driving in that flow state.
Right.
You're not really driving it. Your subconscious is driving it. Your subconscious these numbers may not be right, but something like your subconscious is 100,000 or 100 million times faster or something like that than your conscious mind. So it could go choo-choo. As opposed to you go, oh, wait, and you try to steer it, and then you crash into the car. Right? It's like when you throw a piece of paper away, you just go pick the paper and then throw it, it goes right in. But the moment and you try to throw it,
You're going to miss.
and then you missed, and you grossly miss. You're like, what happened? But
I was even concentrating.
So one method in shooting and one method in thinking is to look away and then look and shoot in one movement, as opposed to look first.
Aim.
Because your conscious mind can only take in supposedly 1,000 bits of information, but your subconscious mind can take in something like 10 million bits of information. So that's why you look away and then you shoot. It's like you're letting your subconscious happen. But again, your subconscious needs to become patterned,
Right.
in order for you to be able to act that way. How does it become patterned?
Constant practice.
Constant practice in practicing in a flow state, to where you did Tenkan 200 times in this flow state. It becomes part of your body and you're part of your movement. It's like these people that they play baseball and then they play golf like they play baseball. There's some carryover, there's hand-eye coordination, but it's not exactly the same. But it's similar, right? It's that same hand-eye coordination, but it's really subconscious patterning. If I practice Aikido and this person goes to tackle me, we don't do that many tackle defenses in Aikido. My body should go right into something which is very similar, which is rokata tori, rokata tori, right?
Right.
And then your body moves a certain way, and then you're balanced a certain way. So your body overlays these subconscious patterns over
In a
different
situation.
in that type of situation, and then your body moves. But how do you learn that? Again, it's that traditional training, which is just keep doing it 100,000 times. Even when you're bored, just keep doing it.
See, to me, that is one of the things that I really associate with traditional methodology, which is getting to what some people talk about, the 10,000 repetitions, the significant number of repetitions during practice, so that when you're doing and you forget Tenkan exercise, but just doing Shomenuchi Ikkyo, you're going to do it enough times during that class compared to somewhere else,
Yeah.
where you're like, in your mind, you're thinking, I wish this would end. Right?
Much,
You're thinking, you're like, I wish this would end. And then they're like, okay, now switch to Tenkan.
Yeah.
And it's never going to end. And that feeling, though, of you wish it would end is like, that's in my mind when you're starting to get the good training. Because
Yeah.
you need to like, and then get past the I wish it would end, and you just keep going on from there. That's in my mind, especially like with under your training, but also under Furuya Sensei, like that to me has been a continuous methodology.
Yeah.
That seems very traditional to me.
And that's the hard part, is that how quickly can you flip the switch and get into that flow state brainwave to where you can just absorb the movement in one move. Like Fury Sensei, you would do this thing where he'd go next and he'd throw the person down and then go, okay, try it, and walk away. Most people hadn't even switched or hadn't even sat down. And then he would look to see who caught it. And then you would have to let go of your conscious mind and then just start moving your body, and then you could show that whether you got it or not. But that's the hard part. Like, if you did, what is it? Malcolm Gladwell, the 10,000 repetitions. In Japan, you know what the number is?
100,000?
40 to 60,000.
Yikes.
Depending on the person you talk to, right? So they say it takes that long, right? Miyamoto Musashi said, like, it takes 1,000 days to forge your spirit and 10,000 days to polish it or something like that. But that's that thing, right? Like, how long, if you did the math, how long would that take? And then remember, in those days, you didn't go in and do your class for 1 hour. You lived there.
Yeah.
247, 365 every day. You trained from sun up to sundown, and then you had to go clean the place up and make the teacher's food. And then if you were lucky, you had a teacher that didn't drink. And then they go, okay, time to go drinking. And then you go drinking with the teacher, and then you go do something. You wake up at, you're like, oh,
hungover, and we got to do this again.
And I got to go make the teacher's breakfast, and then go train and all that stuff. He punched me in the face, all these, and then some stuff happened, and then I went to sleep, and then I woke up. He slapped me, and some other stuff happened. I made him dinner, and then I went to, like the training it's supposed to seem endless. It's supposed to be, there's so many different reasons why they do that, but one of them is that you have to let go of the desire for it to end.
Right.
So you have to flip that switch and just be like, Tenkan. Oh, class is over? All right, class over.
Right.
To where your subconscious just did Tenkan that whole time. But your conscious mind is going, I'm tired. I have to go to the bathroom. Ooh, what do we have to drink later? Hey, I wonder what's for dinner tonight.
Right.
Your conscious mind is going through all these things to try to distract you. But really, you just have to flip into your subconscious movement, into that flow state, and then just do the movement. Chip away at your 60,000 times. But that's the hard part. So traditional training doesn't seem all that valuable today because no one wants to put in the 10 years, right? Everybody wants to put in 10,000, repetitions. It's more than 10,000,
right?
Way more than 10,000. And then it's 10,000 at this level, and then it's 10,000 at the next level, and then 10,000, and then you go, oh, that's how you do it, and then all of a sudden my knee gives out, and my knee doesn't move that way anymore. So then it's 10,000 at that level, right? And then I'm getting old. I can't move my hips like that. Okay, it's 10,000 at that level, right? But you have to. And that's why you have to fall in love with the process. You have to become serious about the process because every stage of the game has its obstacle that you have to surmount. You're at a certain age, your legs will stop moving. At a certain age, your body will start moving. At a certain age, this will happen, and all these things will be taken away from you. You might be all buff in your 20s, like we all are, but then when you turn 50, you're like, I need a nap right now, right? You got to put in your 10,000 reps there. All these places you're going to have to put in your 10,000 reps because every stage of the game has a different obstacle that you have to overcome. And then that's what you're trying to learn is how to circumvent your desire to quit or go off course. Well, I don't really need to train anymore. I'm a teacher now, and all these excuses that you come up, and my big toe kind of hurts. Oh, well, I've got this phone call today. I have a phone call at 2:00. I can't train today. Class is at 6:00. Oh, I'll be busy. But that's the idea. Just you deviate, come back. You deviate, you come back. You deviate, come back. And every stage of the game has an obstacle that you must overcome. And so that's what traditional means, having the mindset, the spirit, the wherewithal, the character, the perseverance, or whatever it is, which keeps you coming back for more. And that's why it's not necessarily about who's doing Tenkan exactly the way O-Sensei did it, or who stands exactly the way O-Sensei stands. You're not O-Sensei. He's 5'2", right? So he stands a different way than you would. A person if you're 6'6" and you're fighting a person who's 4'10", you can't levy the sword down at their throat. You'd be pointing it down like this. But you would still need to have it in kamae. So then this idea of always having it pointed at the throat, That's their tradition.
Right.
But the reality is that you would never drop your tip that low, even if the person was that small, right? And yeah, why you find somebody that tall, that short? You know, well, that's a different story. But the point is that you have to kind of like take the teaching and go, well, it has to be modified for this situation this way. But that modification, but I teach it this way, but it's modified this way.
Right.
I teach it this way, but it's modified this way. And then always going back, trying your best to always go back to the traditional point, so that you can stay as closest to that lineage, that teaching, that you go, oh, that's what O Sensei was talking about. Oh my gosh! Everyone goes, oh, O Sensei said Shiho is the key to Aikido or something like that. And they go, oh my God! So Shihonage is the key to Aikido. Maybe, except for Shiho means someone said it means four corners. It doesn't necessarily mean four corners. Shiho can in a broader sense can mean the four directions: north, south, east, and west. So what he's really talking about is movement around the world, or but like you start getting all crazy and trying to interpret this person's enlightenment.
Right.
He did all the work. Just try to do your best to get to that level of Aikido. And then that level of Aikido will take you your entire life. And you have to have something inside of you that keeps you going, keeps you traditional, so that you don't deviate. You're like, hey, today we're going to do kickboxing. Do you know how to do kickboxing? No, I just thought it'd be fun. How's that traditional? And then what does that end up happening to the student? That student says, oh, yeah, Aikido is just really kickboxing. And where'd you get that from? Oh, this one guy. And then that thing dies with you. So don't let it die in your generation, right? Keep it, and that's where you have to constantly be going like, oh, I made a mistake, everybody. Not kickboxing, not this thing. Not that there's anything wrong with kickboxing. That you're trying your best to stay as close as you can to the center, to the traditional Aikido, because, well, if not, then go do something else, man.
Yeah.
You don't like that? They got Krav Maga. They don't think they have much of a tradition. They got other martial arts. They got boxing. Doesn't have much of a tradition. Even boxing has a tradition. But it would be nice if people were serious about the process, dedicate themselves to the process, because the process is really what's traditional.
Well, that too, we were talking earlier about, O Sensei and how people watch the techniques he's doing. But the thing is, he put in the work from a younger age to get there. It seems like people want to circumvent the path to get to where he is without putting in the same work O Sensei did to get there.
Well, and that's what's hard too, is that O Sensei, he also didn't like to be videotaped or filmed. So what you could be watching and you think is Aikido may not even be what his real Aikido is. And that's a story for a different day, though.
Yeah.
So, I think we've had some interesting discussions about traditionalism. Yeah. I think we should end here for today.
Is there like one final thing you want to say about tradition to wrap it up?
Tie everything up in a nice little bow.
Just be serious about the process. I mean, that's really what traditionalism is. As far as I know today. It could be different later.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you for watching this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And make sure you hit like, subscribe, and follow us on social media.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.